So, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, which is always a great way of starting your segments, because I know I'm going to get conspiracy theorists in the comments afterwards, there were people from the Financial Times there who were discussing the scene in British politics and giving some thoughts. And I just had to go over this on stream, as it's unreal just how clueless people in our journalism class are in their little bubble in terms of what's happening in politics. And the things she says, again, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, are just so revealing about how these people think. Let's take a look.
Ironically, I think the UK and will appear to be by the end of the year, and Martin, I think you will disagree, but let's see. But by the end of the year, the UK is going to appear as one of the more stable countries, because we essentially have gone through our era of populism. I'm not being complacent. We could have another wave, but we've gone through our populism. We had Brexit, and I think now.
So, of course, the only thing that was the spectre of populism in the UK, the only thing that could possibly be populism, is Brexit happening. There weren't indeed so many other social ills and economic ills happening in our country that could potentially be emblematic of the kind of populism that we're feeling other than Brexit. Very frustrating lens for her to look at on this issue very specifically. But again, the idea that the populism that we saw, the beliefs that people had, this kind of distrust in politics, this disengagement from our political class, this feeling of disenfranchisement with what our political class was giving us in the run-up to 2016, given the austerity that built up to that. And we know austerity was one of the bigger contributors into certain areas of the country voting for Brexit very specifically. She's treating this as some kind of latent thing that just happened out of nowhere, rather than a very specific material consequence of what people were subjected to in terms of their material conditions. Again, this is obviously awful lib-brain stuff where nothing can ever be a consequence of material conditions, and it all just happens in some kind of weird vacuum. Or, well, the populism bit is over. Where did it come from? We don't know. What are the causes? Who really knows at all? It just happened out of nowhere, and it's gone away again. Fingers crossed the grown-ups are back in charge. Peak lib brain. Peak, it just fell out of the sky. It didn't come out of huge amounts of immiseration, of the social contract being broken down by neoliberalism, by our local communities being destroyed and being replaced by things like massive mega corporations that have taken away loads of things like the level of community that we felt, or the stability of our employment, the removal of our working conditions, all of these things just changing over the course of neoliberalism and globalization. And to say such a thing at the World Economic Forum in Davos, surrounded by all the people who caused these problems, the people who were the absolute progenitors of the corporate takeover of so many sections of our society, right? Not the evil legion of doom trying to make you eat the bugs, as much as all of the propagandists will try and tell you that's the case. They're just capitalists, right? That's all the World Economic Forum are. They're just capitalists, they're just corporations who want to try and find a way of ensuring their hegemony forever by trying to tinker around with capitalism to fix all the problems that they've caused without actually fixing the issues at the base end, much like what happens with the rise of populism, where base levels of the existence that we took for granted were taken away by neoliberalism, were taken away by cucking our entire society out to the corporate class, were the reason why the material conditions that generated populism existed. And these people are the ones who are at fault, and she's saying it there. Like, it's so wonderfully and beautifully ironic and clueless for her to be saying it right now. History must remain ended. I mean, that's basically what the whole Great Reset was, quote unquote. It was just, let's find a more humane way of doing capitalism, and that just breaks apart the fundamentals of capitalism anyway, the stakeholder capitalism stuff. It's not a policy, it's just, let's just fingers crossed that CEOs will do the right thing, which of course they won't do, because that's not how capitalism works. But anyway, let's continue.
We have essentially two parties, sort of, I think business can live with. And will probably be far less consequential in election than everywhere else.
Literally, mask off. Completely mask off, just saying, yeah, the parties are the same, they exist the same, They exist to do the biddings of business for businesses to be able to work with. No things like Brexit or the well-being of our own citizenry or the social needs of our population and maintaining wealth within communities rather than it being extracted by corporations for big business to be able to get their claws into. None of the parties are going to get out of the way in that anymore. Even though, again, this was literally the kind of thing that caused the populism that she's decrying in the first place. And she's letting it slip and saying, yeah, you don't have a choice. It's really good when people don't have a choice. That's definitely going to continue to enfranchise them in politics and definitely won't lead us to more populism in the first place because, again, this is a result of material conditions. It's a result of the kind of policies where all our parties did was care about sucking up to big business. It's what they've done since 1979 for that entire period. And to think that what most of the journalists in our country believe. Remember, this is the editor of the Financial Times. This isn't just some nobody. This is somebody who has a huge control over one of the most kind of trusted journalistic outlets in our country and worldwide as well. Just taking it as read, as many of our liberal journalist class do, that once the adults in the room of Starmer come in, suddenly all of the things that led to the political upheaval of the last 7 years are just going to go away. When are they going to fix the NHS? Probably looks like they're not going to be able to do that. Are they going to fix issues with the housing crisis? I mean, unless they get tough on people like BlackRock and Vanguard, or short-term lets, which they've not said that they're going to do, they're not going to have issues with that. Unless they actually put money into getting away from corporate control of our economy, of financial control of our economy by global capital, which they're doing the opposite of doing so. Rachel Reeves, the current Shadow Chancellor, is literally at the World Economic Forum in Davos, having meetings with JP Morgan, having meetings with people like Goldman Sachs, which is where Rishi Sunak literally used to work, who were people who helped precipitate the global financial crisis, which is one of the big symptomatic failures of neoliberal capitalism that led to the upheaval that justified the austerity that led to Brexit. Right, or like patient zero in terms of the failure of neoliberalism is the global financial crisis. And she's literally there talking to these people to try and woo them to supporting her in government. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, somebody who is causing a lot of the problems in our housing sector at the moment by buying up loads of family houses to be able to become this gigantic corporate landlord. Larry Fink explicitly is backing Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister. And unless you have broad social and economic change, all of those material conditions that created the populism that these people are decrying, those will stay the same. It will come back and it will not be as scattered as it was during Brexit. It'll be far more focused, and it'll be far stronger, and there'll be somebody more competent than Boris Johnson to marshal these people. Somebody a little less forgiving in terms of fiscal policy as well was going to marshal these people into populism. We're already seeing it on the continent. I mean, she's right to say that these issues are still happening across the continent, but they are the people who are the canary in the coal mine for us. It's not the other way around, because Brexit wasn't just a revolt against the liberal order. It was a revolt against an entire political system that had left communities in the north behind, that had left places that were completely forgotten behind, that essentially centralised the entirety of our economy in the financial sector in London at the expense of industrial centres in the north that got deindustrialised by the political elite that had converged upon the same policy of deindustrialisation under Thatcher and under Blair. It was this continual adherence to a single ideological policy from both ends of our political spectrum, from both parts of the uni party of the Labour and Conservatives, that led to populism happening, where they had to break out of this first past the post prison, that when we only had two choices and they were given the option in Brexit. Of course they took it. Of course they took the option of Brexit to try and break themselves out of this continual prison of politics only ever being single ideology, there being no diversion, no deviation at all from this single ideology. Now we're back in the very same place that caused those problems. And here she's saying, actually, democracy sucks. It's much better when democracy, there's no choice. You have the choice of one party that's pro-business or another party that's pro-business. And here I am at the World Economic Forum in Davos to talk about how great it is that there's nobody there representing the actual people. And that's what populism is specifically about. Populism isn't just when right-wingers are racist, like lots of liberal types try and claim that it as. I'm a populist personally. I'm a left-wing populist, right? The definition of populism is this separation between the people and the elites. And of course, that is what bourgeois versus proletariat is. The proletariat, the people, the bourgeois are the elites. That's a foundation principle of Marxist analysis of political economy. I am a populist personally, and it is that fight against people versus the elites that precipitated things like Brexit, because the elites have decided what policy will be, and you just have to vote for which colour team you want to be able to implement that policy. It leads to political disenfranchisement, it leads to people revolting, it leads to things like Brexit and other kinds of populism, both left and right wing. Exactly, it's a rhetorical tactic, not an ideology. You're absolutely right. Set the shallow. And here she is saying, isn't it great how the elites can choose and the people must decide between which colour elites they want? Red tie elites or blue tie elites. The same ideology from different colours of the political spectrum. And these people just don't understand. Like, it's just like when we watched earlier on Question Time, Fiona Bruce surprised that people couldn't get dentist appointments, because the political elite, like who's reporting for the Financial Times, like who's part of our broader political and journalistic establishment, they don't live in the real world. They're not on the front lines dealing with what happens when you can't feed your children, when your community breaks down because all of the assets have been flogged off to corporations, your swimming pools, your libraries, your community centres, your parks. All of that's gone. It's all just got massive multinational corporation badge slapped on the front of it, and it's now not free. You have to pay money for it. It's not part of your community anymore. It's just another capital asset for people to engage with in this grand neoliberal globalized market. And nobody's promising to change that. Nobody's promising to fix any of these things. And again, I would like to stress again, this isn't some plan. This isn't some masterminded plan by Klaus Schwab and his legion of globalists. It's just capitalism. As the chatter points out, it is inherently cannibalistic. It eats itself. People and corporations, they took all of working class people's assets, and now they've got no assets left to take. So they've started coming after middle class people, and now people are revolting. That's why we're at this point, because nobody's decided to take the actual, genuine, difficult decision, which is to stand up to corporations, to stand up to the business elite, to stand up to the people who have the money and who have the power to take back what's ours in terms of the assets that got sold off to them during the neoliberal period, the collectively owned assets of our society. And this isn't even a particularly communistic position. This is just wanting what we had in the post-war consensus that everybody feels like we lost. Even staunch conservatives say, oh, we used to own British Petroleum. We used to own this, we used to own that. But it's now being owned by some multinational private investment firm from another country that we'd never heard of before. It was making all the money out of what used to be our state-owned assets. And this is why people don't get this sense of national pride anymore, and why they're very easy to be caught up in right-wing populist surges against what they perceive as to be elites changing the culture through things like immigration. When, of course, all they really care about is money. It's about material interests at the end of the day. And that's what these people completely fail to understand. And this clip, specifically, very, very illuminating as to just how far removed from people in this country they really are. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.